Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Ravi Kahlon, the Minister for Jobs, Economic Recovery, and Innovation, and your MC for today's event. I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, and I'm pleased to be alongside Premier John Horgan for this very important announcement. We are also joined virtually by Dr. Van Leeuwenhoek, Executive Chairman of Crystal X Venture Capital, and also I would like to welcome Wendy Hulbert, who is the President and CEO of Life Sciences BC, and also Greg Davion, President and CEO of BC Business Council. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us virtually today. Over the course of the pandemic, our government has been taking action to enable strong economic recovery that works for everyone. We know that people and businesses and communities have been struggling. Our government has been working hard to ensure that recovery is innovative, sustainable, and inclusive. We are seeing positive signs as our economy is starting to bounce back. BC has seen 11 straight months of job gains, and BC has the highest job recovery rate in Canada. But there's so much more work to do. While we're supporting people, businesses, and communities that need help right now, we're also looking forward to long-term economic growth, strategic growth that aligns with the values of British Columbians. Today's announcement is new, bold, and the first of its kind, and will help position BC as a front-runner in the post-pandemic recovery. I would like to invite now Premier John Horgan to the podium to talk to you about the new announcement in BC.
Thank you, Ravi, and it is great to be here today. I represent the traditional territory of the Sauk and the Pacheedaht First Nations on the west coast of Vancouver Island, just outside of Victoria. And it's a real honor to be here today with our guests to talk about a transformative program that we've been developing here in British Columbia over the past number of months. As Ravi said, of course, we've been focused on the pandemic for the past 14 months, filling gaps in the marketplace, making sure that we're supporting businesses, people, and communities wherever the opportunity presents itself, working collaboratively with other orders of government, working with the private sector to make sure we get the mix right to address the challenges that have been created by COVID-19. But we've also been looking beyond the pandemic. What do we do next? Where does British Columbia go? And today's announcement is the first step in that direction. Today, Minister Kahlon introduced legislation to support the creation of InBC, a new strategic investment fund that will be focused on anchoring our tech sector, life sciences, green tech, and other industry innovators who are looking for capital to either scale up or to anchor here in British Columbia. We'll be representing the values that are important to British Columbians with a triple bottom line focused on people, planet, and profit. Making strategic investments to make sure that the intellectual property, the ideas that are being grown in our post-secondary institutions and in our industrial sectors can stay here. And we've looked around the world at other jurisdictions and we've tried to do our level best to manage and monitor what's happening there so that we can build a better program here in British Columbia. For those who've been paying attention, of course, you'll know that we started talking about InBC back in September when we announced our Stronger BC plan, which was focused primarily on getting through the pandemic. Today's announcement is about where do we go from here? How do we make sure that BC's innovators can use InBC to put down those roots, to help with startups, to help with scale-ups, and most importantly, to send a message to the world in multiple sectors that British Columbia is a place to come, put down roots, and to attract the talent we're going to need to meet the challenges of the 21st century. The post-pandemic world will be unlike the world that we entered into 14 months ago. But we do know that BC has strategic advantages in a number of areas, and InBC is designed to make sure that we can take advantage of those strategic positions that we had pre-pandemic and will be stronger coming out of the pandemic. The investment decisions of InBC will be made by the Chief Investment Officer, who will report to a board of directors, the majority of which will come from the private sector. The focus will be on creating and maintaining jobs and growing that innovative sector, whatever it might be, that will attach to the values that British Columbians hold dear. Focusing on climate action and decarbonizing our economy, making sure that the intellectual capacity of British Columbia can be harnessed and anchored here in British Columbia. Too often in the past, the good ideas that have come from our post-secondary institutions have migrated to other jurisdictions for a host of reasons. We want to stem that flow of brain power out of British Columbia and encourage more people to come in the days and weeks and months ahead. NBC is fashioned after the Irish and Danish model. We consulted widely internationally, and Ravi advised me that there was a briefing this morning, 260 invitations around the world, 213 logged in to hear what's going on in BC. We're pretty excited about this, and I know that there'll be a number of questions. We have some validators from industry who will be speaking after me, and I just want to say I want to lift my hands to Minister Kahlon and his entire team for doing what governments don't always do, and that is focus on the possible rather than what's right in front of them. We have, as a province, been absolutely focused on getting through COVID-19. Now we want to look forward to that world without COVID-19, where innovators can look to British Columbia as the place that they want to come and put down roots. I'm very excited about today. It's the beginning of a new future for British Columbia, and I'll pass the microphone back to Minister Kahlon, and we'll go from here for the rest of the program.
Thank you so much, Premier. And NBC is a game changer. And I want to thank the hundreds of businesses, business and industry leaders who've provided their expert advice and guidance on this very important initiative for BC. I would now like to invite Dr. Wal van Leeurup, Executive Chairman of Crystal X Venture Capital, to speak about the opportunities the Strategic Investment Fund can create. Doctor?
Thank you, Minister. Well, I congratulate the government of British Columbia for launching NBC. This is a bold step towards creating a low carbon society and an internationally renowned technology sector in our province. BC is well positioned to help transform the global economy to become carbon free by 2050, as many aspire. We have a talented, diverse workforce developing world-class innovations in decarbonization. We're also strong in digital technology, fusion energy, hydrogen and fuel cells, life sciences, regenerative agriculture, and water management. Together, we can propel BC towards net zero, while at the same time leading our traditional mining, forestry, and natural gas industries into the green economy. Every industry needs to become green and digital. A lack of, in particular, scale-up capital held BC back from achieving its full potential. NBC will be a significant driver to close this funding gap in our province, and it will position our most promising startups to grow into winners. Too often, they felt that they had to relocate abroad or seek foreign investors to grow, or foreign acquirers. Now, the 500 million NBC Strategic Investment Fund gives our local innovation champions an opportunity to scale at home and compete globally. And there is a unique opportunity to further grow the fund to a much bigger size, possibly as large as $2 billion, by leveraging private Canadian and international investments. NBC signals to the world that our province is not just a beachhead for established companies, but rather a global innovation center for the future of industry. That is a multi-trillion-dollar global opportunity, and actively participating in that will help create good-paying jobs, desirable social services, and wealth for the future of British Columbians. The creation of NBC marks an inflection point for our province. Once more, chapeau to the BC government for launching this important fund.
Thank you so much, Dr. van Leeurup. I appreciate your time and your comments today. I would now like to ask Wendy Hulbert to share her thoughts on NBC, how it can help foster job creation and provide opportunities for promising new companies. Wendy?
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be here today to be part of this exciting announcement. Firstly, I'd like to applaud Premier Horgan, Minister Kahlon, and the BC government on taking this bold step of launching the NBC Fund. On behalf of the life sciences sector, we couldn't be more pleased. BC is home to Canada's fastest growing life sciences sector, with a dynamic and world-class community comprised of almost 2,000 companies employing roughly 20,000 people and growing. The sector offers tremendous potential for exponential growth and foundational support for the BC economic recovery, and will continue to deliver innovation, attract investment, and create high-paying jobs. Over the last year, well, it's been an interesting year, as we all know. BC Life Sciences innovation has been at the forefront of developing solutions to address the COVID-19 challenges that were faced. From vaccine development to therapeutics, ventilators, screening tools, the COVID-19 assessment app, all of these have had BC innovation at the forefront of the development of these solutions. We have a long history of discovery in British Columbia through our world-class research and academic institutions who continue to attract talent from the rest of the world. But where we've struggled is in scaling companies. We have the great ideas, and as has already been said, sometimes those ideas either get exported or we struggle with scaling them. The NBC Fund will play an important role in enabling growth, supporting startups, helping promising BC businesses scale up and continue to attract and develop talent in our province. All of this is going to be for the benefit of all of our British Columbians that we live with. Following the principles of innovation, inclusion, and sustainability, the NBC Fund will create an important competitive advantage for businesses and for the BC life sciences sector and other sectors, as has already been mentioned. We look forward to working with NBC to further expand the life sciences sector and enhance BC's resilience to future health challenges, and ultimately ensuring both our health and economic security. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you for your comments and representing Life Sciences BC. And we're certainly proud of the role Life Science BC has played in this pandemic and also in the economic impact it has in our province. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. I would now like to ask Greg Davion from the BC Business Council of BC to the podium to speak about how NBC can support further growth in the business sector. So over to you, Greg.
Well, thanks so much, Minister, for including me today. I'm delighted to be here today to participate in this announcement, a bold initiative that's going to enable us to leap into the digital economy of the 21st century, as Wal and Wendy alluded to. I want to congratulate you, Premier, you, Minister Kahlon, your colleagues, and also government staff that thoughtfully listened, collaborated, and then led on this bold initiative moving forward to smartly build in BC. And why I say smartly is that it's been done in a way that actually sought out advice of expertise and also the marketplace to help inform what capital markets need to leverage and participate in exciting new firms' investments, and also those firms that are growing and scaling, and so that we can retain them here in British Columbia. Before the pandemic, all of us were experiencing technology over the decades that was moving increasingly and exponentially faster and faster. And what we've seen during COVID is that much of that technology in our lives and the way we work and the way we educate ourselves is accelerated by as much as a decade. And so the consequence of that is that we're not only going to need as businesses the solutions that Wal and Wendy talked about, but also governments will need the technology and the new innovation to help us not just survive, but to thrive going forward. And our country, as Wal alluded to, and specifically BC specifically, is home to some of the most creative and entrepreneurial people that you find anywhere. They're in every part of our province, and they are relentlessly developing novel, globally relevant, and impactful game-changing solutions, products, and discoveries. We've seen that with BC's mRNA technology that is embedded today in the vaccines and therapeutics that are literally saving global lives. For decades, we've punched far above our weight as a country and as a province, generating ideas and then those concepts and taking them to early stage. But what we failed, as Wal and other speakers have alluded to, is that we often fail to support those companies as they go through the critical stages of growth and change, and ultimately supporting the firms, their ideas, and the people and the innovation and solutions to stay here in our country and in our province. The result is that growth and commercialization is often sold or it moves elsewhere to be nurtured on the needs that it has. And this happens to our collective detriment, and often British Columbians and Canadians buy those ideas and products back at retail rather than having the opportunity to adopt them early in the development of the design. But what it means is far more important to our province. The phenomenon means that we lose generational talent with promise and with ambition, high-wage jobs, the opportunity for Indigenous populations to fully participate in our economy, increased productivity, trade revenues, investments, taxes, and the secondary research and innovation that comes from them that creates new spin-offs, new clusters, and new opportunities at scale. When we have supported these firms and these ideas and people, we've led globally. These leadership clusters in BC include gaming, FX, animation, and virtual reality now being used in almost every sector of the economy. We've also seen it in our low-carbon natural resources and energy offers to the world. Increasing new areas of high demand that BC really does lead in, as Wendy talked about, in quantum computing, IoT and sensors, life sciences and agri-tech. And the aggregate is an opportunity to attract ESG capital, but also to leverage global capital and talent as we grow those businesses out. And there's several factors that are going to help us retain those firms and scale them to be world-class. A lot of them are endemic and those that we still have to work on. We have world-class universities, technology schools, and design post-secondary institutions. The right policies to retain IP are things that we need to work on, encouraging innovation, adoption, and higher levels of productivity that raise wages and opportunity. And to do that through a diverse and collective stream of great talent that we have in a resident in our province. But one of the most important things that NBC addresses today is the need for those firms to stay in British Columbia, to have access to capital at various stages of their development in a variety of forms. They need it as they grow, evolve, pivot, compete, and at speed commercialize their products and services to the world to be truly successful. I have little doubt that the spirit of collaboration with common purpose at speed through NBC will make a difference. This fund will help be a key propellant to aid in the liftoff of many BC companies today and those that will come tomorrow into the 21st century and our digital low-carbon economy. In doing so, it's also going to inspire the next generation of British Columbians that dream about being Jimmy Pattison, or dream about Wendy MacDonald, or Shahrazad Rafati, or Dr. Carl Hansen, or Chief Counselor Crystal Smith, making a difference through the companies and the products that they develop. Looking ahead, I believe NBC will be an important tool to help scale up globally impactful British Columbia businesses that establish thriving clusters of innovation and tackle some of the world's biggest challenges and the opportunity to lift up our existing economy and people here at home for the prosperity of our province. So thank you very much for the lead and the development of NBC.
Thank you so much, Greg, Wendy, and Wal. I really appreciate your comments and your insights in helping us develop this initiative going forward to get to this point, and I know we'll continue to collaborate on a range of issues to make BC stronger, create more jobs, and keep our talent right here in BC. And with that, I'll ask the media to pose their questions through Lindsay.
Thank you, Premier. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. First question today is from Rob Shaw, Check News.
Hi, Premier. I wanted to ask you about the paid sick leave issue. Ontario talking about doubling the federal program. The Prime Minister today suggesting he would like to see provinces implement their own programs through businesses. What are you looking at from your government? Are you looking at helping the existing federal program, a BC program, and when can we hear some details on that from you?
Thanks, Rob, for the question. And we've been focused here in British Columbia on establishing a national paid sick leave program going back to last May. I remember quite vividly raising it at the Council of the Federation with my colleagues, premiers from across the country, and with the Prime Minister. And at the time, there was little appetite for it. I tried to make the case that as we went through COVID-19, of course, you'll remember we were in the early stages at that point, No one anticipated that we would still be here a year later. But the objective of the province, and that was involved, I have to say, Greg Davignon, the BC Business Council, the BC Chamber of Commerce, the BC Federation of Labor, and a range of other organizations wrote to the Prime Minister and said, we need a national program so that people aren't making a choice between going to work sick and staying home to meet the needs of their families. And the Prime Minister agreed with that, ultimately, brought forward a program that clearly had gaps. We identified those gaps, as did others. We raised the issues with the federal government, and we had hoped that their budget, the day before our budget, would have done something to address those issues. Having said that, we were disappointed to see no progress, and therefore we've gone back to the shelf and taken the programs that we were working on here in British Columbia, and we're trying to get those up to speed to fill the gaps at the federal level. I have not engaged with my colleagues, other premiers, at this point. I know that Premier Ford has made some suggestions that have not been well received. He has not talked to me about them, but I know we have work underway, and we'll have more to say in the days ahead. And I appreciate that British Columbians are focused on this issue, as they should be, and as we were 12 months ago. But we are where we are, and now the challenge for us is to make sure we bring forward something that can supplement the work that the federal government has already done and will meet the needs of working people.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. Just on travel restrictions, I know we're waiting for more information on the kind of checkpoint system this week, but have you considered, or is there any way to tie these travel restrictions into the air system, which I realize is federally regulated, but someone getting on a flight in Kamloops, landing in Victoria, not having to go through the same restrictions of the ferry terminal, for example. Is there anything BC can do on that? Is that on your radar, or is that just outside of your jurisdiction?
Well, jurisdiction matters not to the people of BC. What they want is results. This is not unlike the last question, Rob, in that the federal government had undertaken a national program that didn't meet the test. The federal government also brought forward border restrictions at our urging, again, over a year ago. And we supplemented that by sending provincial public employees to assist federal workers so they could get a program in place to manage and monitor our international borders. With respect to people coming from other parts of Canada, I have been appealing to my colleagues in Alberta and across the country to stay home. I've been saying that like a broken record for months and months, and I'm grateful now that I'm hearing from other premiers in other parts of the country. They're not only urging their citizens to stay home, they're directing them to do so. So with respect to interprovincial travel, these are challenges, and particularly with Alberta. And I don't say that in a negative way. We have so many economic, social, and cultural connections to Alberta. People are going back and forth in border communities like Grand Prairie and Dawson Creek and Elkford and the other communities along the Alberta border into British Columbia. And so it's extremely difficult to manage and monitor those issues. British Columbia was not built to be exclusive, it was built to be inclusive. We have been doing everything we can to build transportation infrastructure to welcome people to British Columbia, not to discourage them coming. So these are big challenges. We're aware of them, and we're appealing to our colleagues across the country to reinforce with Canadians that now is the time. For the next 4 weeks, let's get to the May long weekend. Vaccinations are coming thick and fast. We have seen a flattening of cases here in British Columbia and a decline in hospitalizations. We need to keep at the front of our minds the tireless work of healthcare providers that have been at the task for 14 months now with little chance of a break. Now is not the time to indulge ourselves. Now is the time to focus on our collective responsibility to bend this curve, bring down the case count, get the vaccine that's offered to you as quickly as you can, and let's get the summer going, and let's get on with programs like NBC to build the British Columbia that we all want.
Next question is from Justine Hunter, Globe and Mail.
Thank you, and I'd like to speak about sick pay as well. I'm wondering, Premier, if you can just clarify, do you think British Columbia needs a mandated sick pay program, or are you talking about something that deals only with the pandemic? Well,
I think at the start of the pandemic, it was all about the pandemic. But what we've learned, not just in people who are not able to go to the workplace, but people that we don't want to go to the workplace. We've seen outbreaks in industries because people have not been able to make that hard choice. They've had to go to work to meet the needs of their families. So clearly this was a need throughout the pandemic, but I think certainly other jurisdictions have paid sick programs of one kind or another. Ontario did have one, and it was eliminated just a couple of years ago. So we're looking at not just the pandemic, but what can we do to protect workers and businesses, most importantly, going through this. And we're going to try and find a collaborative way to do that. Again, I want to thank Greg and the Business Council, Chamber, and other industry organizations, the boards of trade, who wrote with one voice to the Government of Canada saying a national plan is a solution for an integrated economy. I still believe that's the case, but I understand the federal government has done what they believe is enough, and we'll be left to fill the gaps.
Follow-up, Justine?
Yes, thank you. Can you give me a sense of a timeline then? Because I've spoken to public health officials who say there are people going to work today with COVID or symptoms of COVID, bringing it into the workforce because they don't have that choice. So it does seem to be a very urgent problem right now.
It is, and again, we were hopeful that the federal budget would have contained elements of filling the gaps and having a genuine national program. That didn't happen. Obviously, we weren't able to amend our budget documents, which came the next day. I know Minister Robinson speaking with the Chamber of Commerce here in the Capital Region and talked about her plans and how she's mobilizing staff. I know that work was done through the summer to bring forward a provincial plan, and we're taking those off the shelf, and we're looking at how we can implement that in a seamless way without putting more burden on business at a time when business can least afford it. But we have to keep in mind those workers that are faced with an extremely difficult choice. We want to eliminate that, take the stress off workers, make sure that they don't make the choice to go to work when they're sick. And I think to bring this home outside of COVID, I don't know, I'm sure that there's not a person watching right now that has not dragged themselves out of their sick bed and gone to work declaring themselves a hero because they're going to take one for the team. Well, what we've learned from COVID-19 is that's not what we want. We don't want heroes. We want people who take care of themselves and don't put their colleagues, their customers, and their businesses at risk. And people shouldn't have to make that choice. I believe it's the responsibility of all of us to fill that gap, and we're going to find a way to do that.
Richard Zisman, Global News.
Sick pay is a priority for the province, but yesterday we heard an announcement from Minister Kahlon adding additional money for businesses that were impacted by the circuit breaker. You moved quickly, you put money in place quickly, and now we're sitting here at sick pay a year later and you aren't filling the gaps. Why aren't you moving as quickly on this as you are on other issues? Is it a matter of cost? Or is it a matter that this is just something businesses don't want? Like, what wall are you running into that makes this not enough of a priority to move as quickly as the circuit breaker grant?
Well, primarily, Richard, it's because there's no mechanism to do this. This is not something that's regularly done. As I said, we do not want to hamper industry at this moment, at a critical time in the pandemic, with additional costs. So we're going to find the resources. The resources are not the issue, it's the delivery of the programs. And we were not delaying. We were aggressive about this issue, and you covered it months and months ago. The federal government committed to a program. They delivered one. It wasn't sufficient. We've asked them to fix it. They haven't, and now we're stepping up. It's not about speed. It's about making sure we get it right. This is a challenging time for all of us. I get that. And this is something that I had hoped that we had turned the page on, but clearly we haven't. That doesn't mean we can't continue with other initiatives. The additional circuit breaker resources were critical because we were asking industry to take another 4 weeks so that collectively we could come through this stronger than we were before it started. So that was priority number one. Today we're talking about the future post-May and into the fall, when we're looking at anchoring and encouraging more economic development in those key sectors that are so critically important, not just to British Columbians, but indeed the world. I believe we're moving as quickly as we can on a whole range of fronts. We have been absolutely clear here in British Columbia that paid sick leave is critical to get through the pandemic, and I believe we'll get there as quickly as we possibly can.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
I do. We're experiencing shortages, it seems, in all the vaccine. It's not coming as quickly as possible. The United States has said that they're going to provide some vaccine to Canada. We know their AstraZeneca vaccine is going to be spread out around the world. What is your pitch to why British Columbia should be receiving some of this AstraZeneca from the United States, and how quickly would you like to see it here?
Well, certainly our relationship with the United States is well known. We have had strong social, cultural, and economic ties with not just our immediate neighbors, Alaska, Washington State, but indeed many states throughout the Union. And we need to make sure that when we reopen, and I know that President Biden understands this, that's why he's focused primarily on moving surplus vaccines to Mexico and to Canada because of those interrelationships that are so obvious and so strong. I'll be talking to Governor Inslee later in the week, as I do regularly, and we'll be talking about a range of border-type issues. We've seen an example in Manitoba where Premier Pallister and the governor of North Dakota have reached an agreement to vaccinate cross-border truckers. That's positive news. That's part of the discussion I'll have with Governor Inslee. AstraZeneca is not yet approved in the United States, and if the supply is as large as we're led to believe, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to secure more through the federal government and any other initiatives that we can undertake as provinces to make sure we get that supply going. As you know, if we had more supply, we'd have more people vaccinated. The vaccine hesitancy, which many have talked about, does not appear to be a problem here in British Columbia. Wherever we've been able to offer vaccine, it's been taken up quickly. Our challenge is supply, but complaining about that will not vaccinate one British Columbian. Working together with the federal government and other partners internationally is the way to go, and I'll keep on that track.
Next question is from Binder Sajjan, CTV.
Hi, Premier. Just back to the travel issue. Would you be in support, if it were able to be done, a regime where even people traveling within Canada would have to have a negative PCR test before they get on a flight?
Well, again, if it were possible is the key to your question, and it's also the key to many other questions. And what we've discovered as a government over the past 14 months is that the professional public service is extraordinarily adaptable to diverse and unique situations that none of us have ever contemplated. Being able to pull together programs like the circuit breaker resources that Minister Kahlon and his team have put together in lightning speed is not what government is built to do. It's traditionally characterized, and I know I'm not looking to Greg to confirm this, but it's traditionally slow, methodical, and focused on the status quo. What we've needed and what we've got, quite frankly, from the professional public service over the past 14 months is nimble, adaptable, focused programs on the needs of sectors as they've emerged. And that's involved collaboration with the private sector, talking to industry leaders, talking to working people and the unions that represent the many, many companies that have been able to continue operating, quite frankly, over the past 14 months, finding a way for all of us to get through this. And on the issue of interprovincial travel, my view is the best course of action is to tell people to stay home. And what we've seen over the past 7 days is results from that approach with the focus on enforcement to come later in the week. Making the case that it's important for people to stay local has worked this week, and it needs to work for the next 4 weeks so that we can salvage the summer.
Binder, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and just on the sick pay program, a lot of the people who would benefit from this are people who are on the lower end of the income scale. Often they are racialized. So what message do you think it sends to those workers in the middle of a pandemic that neither the provinces or the federal government has been able to put together a sick pay program?
Well, I know there's going to be a lot of disappointed people, and I'm among them. We worked really hard. We were the lone voice last summer on this question. We received commitments from the federal government that they got it, and they did. They put in place a program. Unfortunately, that program was unwieldy and didn't meet the needs of the very people you've just mentioned. And so we're circling back to take charge of that issue, and we're going to deliver it for the people who need it. But again, I don't want to sound overly whiny about this, but we had commitments and a growing support through industry, labor, and communities that this was the way to go. Everybody gets that, but we didn't get the program we needed at the time we needed it from the federal government, and they've done a lot of great things over the past 14 months, but this is not one of them, and we're going to have to do our best to fill those gaps. And if there were a way, as the government of Ontario has tried to do, to just supplement it by giving money to the federal government, we would do that. I don't believe that's effective or would work. So that means going back to WorkSafe BC. It means going back to the Minister of Finance and finding a way to deliver these resources. How do we get the money to people who are taking a couple of days to get a PVR test or any other illnesses that they may have through the pandemic? It's not a simple process. There is no structure in place provincially to do that. And that's why I emphasized and leaned in to the need for a national program. And that's why we're going to have to take a few more days to figure this out.
Lisa Houston, News 1130.
Hi there, Premier. Regarding the sick time, it's just not taking time off when sick that employers are running into walls. It's just getting time for COVID tests. I'm hearing from one doctor who says every single day she's getting at least one request for a note from her to either take time off for sick or because they're sick or to go get a COVID test. So the message isn't getting through. So not only are these people not getting paid, they're having employers that are still giving them a hard time about this. So I'm wondering what more can you do on that end?
Well, I think the vast majority of employers understand the importance of an initiative like this to protect their workers, those that are ill and those who are not, and to give confidence to their customers that they are operating a business with the highest standards through a global pandemic. I appreciate that there are a lot of challenges here, and you've identified a couple of them. I believe those could have been addressed through the unemployment insurance program, where the federal government has access to all of the names of people who pay taxes in Canada. We do not. We can use our tax information for tax purposes, not creating other programs. So there's a whole host of privacy issues and a range of other challenges. I know that's cold comfort to individuals who are struggling with health issues, businesses who are worried about how they're going to keep their workforce safe, and also, of course, healthcare providers who are being taken away from the important work they're doing to provide documentation about testing. These are big challenges, and it's sad, I think, sad to say at month 14 that we haven't resolved this issue. It was a critical issue 12 months ago, and we're still talking about it. That disappoints me. And I know it disappoints British Columbians as well.
Follow-up, Lisa.
Regarding the travel restrictions, I'm asking on this behalf of another reporter. They're getting a lot of questions about when we're going to see this enforcement. We've been hearing about this for a couple of weeks. This reporter has heard from RCMP that they haven't given a single $575 ticket, don't intend on stopping people. So what actually is happening on the ground, or when will we see this happening on the ground?
Well, I think Minister Farnworth's been pretty clear. This is a two-step process. We announced the restrictions last week, and we'll announce the enforcement later this week. It's in his hands. As you know, law enforcement is not directed by politicians. Thank goodness for that. We lay out the orders, we lay out the laws, and it's up to law enforcement to deploy resources to meet those expectations. And I know Minister Farnworth's working with E-Division, working with his officials in public safety to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and I'm confident by the end of the week we will be.
Tanya Fletcher, CBC.
Just a little further to that, Premier. I mean, it's been more than a week since you first announced the new travel restrictions. As Lisa mentioned, the road checks still aren't sorted out. You're saying later this week. Any more specifics and why the delay? Is it simply pushback from police? And if so, what are the main sticking points with them?
Again, I'm delighted to be here to talk about NBC, but also to talk about these issues. And I'm not suggesting that they're not important, but I think we've been pretty clear. I said last week restrictions were coming. Get ready for it. I've talked to the tourism sector. I've talked to the Hotel Association just today, the restaurant and hospitality sector, trying to make sure that we've got buy-in for all of these initiatives. And I have to say I'm very impressed with how the umbrella organizations for our tourism and hotel sector have stepped up and done their part to protect British Columbians so that we can look at a positive reopening after the May long weekend and get back to something resembling normal. But I said on Monday we're going to have restrictions by Friday. We do. The minister responsible said we'll have enforcement mechanisms in place by this week. We will.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and as recently as late Friday, even after Minister Farnworth gave his most recent update, the RCMP union, for one, seemed hopeful that your government may back off on the checkpoint system altogether, or at least mobilizing police to enforce it. Are you still guaranteeing that particular aspect will go ahead and use officers to do it?
Well, again, we've been working with E-Division, which is for those who are uninitiated on these terms, E stands for British Columbia. Ask the RCMP why that is. And so we've been working with the RCMP here in British Columbia about where we can strategically locate counterattack type checkpoints to remind British Columbians and to educate them on the importance of staying local. Enforcement tools will be made known later in the week by Minister Farnworth, and we're collaborating and focusing on finding the best way forward. Minister Farnworth also met with representatives from the BIPOC community to hear their concerns, and we've incorporated that in how we've constructed the orders and how we'll deal with enforcement. And then it will fall to law enforcement to make their choices about how they will implement that. At ferry terminals, of course, we have mostly RCMP, but the Delta Municipal Force would be called upon in Tawasin, and the West Vancouver Force will be called upon at Horseshoe Bay. So we're working with, Minister Farnworth is working with law enforcement to make sure we're all comfortable with this, and I appreciate that the time between announcement and delivery is frustrating for people, but I also understand that people are responding. They get it. They understand that we all have to hold together here, and moving from one health authority to another is not in the best interest of salvaging our summer. And so people are already responding before the enforcement tools are in place, and I think that's a good thing.
Next question is from Les Lane, Times Colonist.
Oh, thanks. Is there an outline, Premier, of the problem that NBC is going to tackle? Like the concept that BC firms stall out or get bought out before they reach their full potential. Are there any reports that just outline how prevalent that is? Is it rampant, or what's the score there?
Well, thanks, Les, for the question. And I will say that the objective here, when we reached out to Wall and Wendy and Greg and others in the investment community, was what are we missing? What components are not there to help us anchor our talent, how to make sure we're protecting the intellectual property that oftentimes is developed in our post-secondary institutions and keeping this talent local. And we looked at other jurisdictions around the world, like Ireland, like Denmark, and others, and we've come up with this mechanism. Ravi can fill you in on the gaps, Les, but I appreciate all of the other questions that were asked today were valid and important questions to get on the record. But this is an exciting day for British Columbia. This is a step into another world, and it's a step out of the pandemic, focusing on those businesses, those sectors that will lead us to a decarbonized environment, that will lead us to continuing to build on the successes of life sciences that Wendy talked about. And of course, Greg, the head of the largest employers, the biggest industries in British Columbia, understand and recognize that innovation is critical to their long-term success. So if you're a resource industry, if you're a tech company, if you're a small energy startup, having access to capital to scale up is critically important. And it's the scaling up that's been the challenge. This fund will help us do that. And Ravi can fill in some of the other gaps. Ravi says you don't need any more. Get that.
Les, do you have a follow-up?
Maybe you can ask Ravi the follow-up. Sorry, Les.
The independence that's stressed on the part of the CIO of this outfit. I'm just picturing someone coming up with a guaranteed miracle that'll sequester carbon, and they want to employ 10,000 people in a plant in Langford. CIO passes on it. Are you saying that you're not going to try and lean on them a bit, and that he can tell you to butt out? Is that how it's supposed to work?
That's exactly how it's going to work. The chief investment officer reports to a board of directors that will be 7/9 of which will come from the private sector. There will be 2 deputy ministers on the committee to make sure that these public funds are administered effectively, but they're not there to oversee. They're there to give guidance and advice to other board members. And I'm not going to be leaning into anyone. That's, first of all, not how I've been operating to this point in time, and I don't see any reason to do that now. We need to rely on the expertise of the sector to deliver the tools that are needed for the growth that we are talking about, and to anchor these smaller companies, to allow them to scale up. It's not for politicians to get in the way of that. It's for politicians to make the strategic decision to go in this direction, and we've done that. And we did so with extraordinary collaboration across the board, as evidenced by Wal and Wendy and Greg having the opportunity to come and support this initiative, and countless others, quite frankly, who have said, yeah, this is the way to go. And again, I don't think there was one of them that ever envisioned that the Premier or a minister would lean on a board member or the investment officer to get a particular project underway. That's not what this is about. This is market-driven, market-focused, and that's exactly what we need.
We have time for one more question today. Rob Buffum, CTV-VI.
Oh, great. Thank you for taking my question. And it relates to looking beyond May, specifically with respect to tourism and travel. I've got a document that a local tourism operator has provided our newsroom from Destination Greater Victoria that sets out certain sort of benchmarks as to what the government's indicated might be expected come the summer. It talks about, for example, gatherings of up to 50 people, and by July and August, domestic travel being back to where it was last summer. Can you comment on that? What can people, I know we're in the throes of the third wave, but when we get to June, what can people expect?
Well, Rob, I'm cautious about how I answer your question, because I want to be as optimistic as those in the tourism sector who are looking with great anticipation and hope to post the May long weekend, when we can start to invite more British Columbians to move around, and others from across the country and indeed around the world to come to BC and take advantage of all of that we have to offer. But we're not there yet. So I want to caution everyone that I'm not being overly optimistic here, but I do know that we're all hoping for this. And we at the Premier's table have talked about how will we get to those metrics about when we will open up our borders, when we will invite the world to come. Will we invite the entire world, or only those who have got a good record of vaccination and a low case count? All of those variables are being discussed right now. And what I've heard from the tourism industry is we need a roadmap, and we need you to help us develop that. And we're doing that in consultation. Minister Kahlon, Minister Mark, Melanie Mark, the Minister of Tourism, Arts, Culture and Sport, is leading that discussion, and it is collaborative. It is focused on the needs of industry so that we can open up safely as soon as possible. But I don't want to give false hope. We are in the grip of the final stages of a global pandemic, and if we all hang together for the next 4 weeks, hopefully we'll be in a place where June, July, and most assuredly August and September will be the best months we've had since we turned to the 2020s.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if there's been any contemplation. We've seen the numbers on the island in terms of cases steadily or consistently lower than elsewhere. Is there a scenario where before May 25th there might be some kind of easing of travel restrictions within this region?
Well, again, Vancouver Island has had low case counts, low positivity rates throughout the pandemic. And I think that speaks to the resilience and the focus of the people of Vancouver Island, who practice physical distancing, early adherence to mask wearing, not just indoors but outdoors as well. And so that speaks, I think, to the focus of the people of Vancouver Island. Similarly, in many parts of the north and the interior, we've seen the Kootenays, for example, relatively low case counts and positivity. But Dr. Henry's view is, and I share it, is that COVID is in British Columbia, and it is everywhere. It is not confined to Fraser Health. It's not confined to Vancouver Coastal Health. It is everywhere. And we need to continue to be vigilant wherever we live to keep our contacts low and make sure that we're practicing the skills that now have become so common to us, constantly washing our hands, keeping away from our face as much as possible, and of course, wearing a mask when we're indoors with other people. If we follow these principles, which people have adopted as part and parcel of their everyday activities for the next number of weeks, I'm confident we'll get through this.
That's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us.
And I'll just say to Wall, it's smakelijk. Welterusten. I have a whole bunch of those little bottles / townhouses at my house from my Dutch wife, so they're right behind you. I know exactly what they are. Okay. See ya. Bye, Wendy. Thanks, Greg.